In 1956, park rangers entered a remote cave inside the Grand Canyon and recorded footage that was never supposed to disappear. But what happened next was far more disturbing than anything captured on film, because what truly sealed the fate of Cave 17 wasn't what the camera showed. It was a decision made after the rangers came back. At the time, the National Park Service officially described Cave 17 as geologically unremarkable, just another cave inside a vast, sprawling canyon system. They reported no public danger, no scientific anomaly, and no reason for any kind of concern. And yet, within weeks of that 1956 patrol, something quietly changed behind the scenes. The footage was reviewed internally, then it was forwarded up the chain, then it was archived. It wasn't destroyed, it wasn't classified under any known federal category. It was simply removed from circulation. No copies were distributed, no follow-up study was authorized, and absolutely no explanation was attached. And that silence, that complete lack of information, was entirely intentional. Rangers who participated in the 1956 entry later described the internal review process as unusually brief. There were no technical questions about the footage. No one asked for clarification on what was filmed. There was no discussion about releasing parts of it to the public, which would have been standard practice for a new discovery. The decision was fast, final, and strangely unanimous. After that moment, Cave 17 stopped being treated like a normal site. Patrol schedules were adjusted so that rangers would no longer pass near the cave during their routine rounds. Equipment logs that once mentioned Cave 17 by name suddenly stopped referencing it altogether. Newer rangers were trained using updated maps where the cave's interior markings had quietly, mysteriously disappeared. This wasn't an emergency response. This was something different. It was a slow, deliberate, long-term erasure. By the late 1950s, Cave 17 still existed physically. You could still walk up to it, but administratively, it was fading away. There were no warning signs posted, no official closure notices. Visitors weren't explicitly told to stay away. Instead, the Park Service simply removed every reason for anyone to go there in the first place. And that distinction is incredibly important. Public closures create questions. They invite curiosity, but quiet administrative neglect does not. Internal documents from the early 1960s reveal subtle but troubling shifts in the language being used. Cave 17 was no longer described in simple geological terms. Instead, memos started referring to things like interpretive instability and environmental behavior inconsistent with established cave models. What does that even mean? One internal note recommended that repeated ranger exposure be limited to essential operations only. Another suggested that the footage should remain restricted to archival context, pending future clarity. But that future clarity never came. Instead, the silent decision to ignore the cave hardened with time. Rangers assigned to the area began requesting transfers. Some cited unrelated personal reasons. Others said nothing at all. A few, speaking years later and only off the record, described an unspoken understanding. They said Cave 17 wasn't dangerous in a traditional sense, but it was unsettling in a way that could not be documented properly in a report. They didn't fear a cave-in or a physical threat. They feared uncertainty. By 1962, the situation escalated again without any public announcement. Rangers were quietly instructed to avoid the area entirely. The cave wasn't sealed with concrete or steel, but it was functionally abandoned. Patrol routes were permanently rewritten. Internal briefings no longer mentioned it. Cave 17 had effectively been erased from active park management, and still no official explanation was ever issued. That's what makes the 1956 decision so unusual. It wasn't triggered by an incident. There were no missing persons. No injuries were reported. There was no apparent environmental threat. The footage itself did not show something overtly catastrophic. Instead, it showed something that raised questions no one in a position of authority wanted to formalize. Because once a question enters the official record, it demands an answer. By choosing to bury the footage instead, the Park Service ensured that Cave 17 would exist in a state of permanent ambiguity, not closed, not open, not dangerous, not safe, just unresolved. Decades passed. The film canisters aged in a forgotten storage facility. The rangers who filmed it retired or passed away. Supervisors changed. National park policies evolved. But that one decision remained untouched, a silent rule passed down through generations of park staff. Today, if you file a Freedom of Information Act request about Cave 17, your request isn't denied outright. It's redirected. It's deflected. It's as if the administrative system itself has been trained to move your attention somewhere else, anywhere else. Former rangers describe the same sensation when you ask them about it. You see a pause, a subtle shift in their tone, then a very careful choice of words. Cavite Secchi, they might say, was never meant to be explained. It was only meant to be managed. Because reopening that footage would mean reopening the decision made all those years ago. And that decision was never about what the camera captured. It was about what no one could confidently explain after they watched it. Cave 17 remains where it has always been, a dark opening in the canyon wall. The footage, somewhere in an archive, still exists, and the silence surrounding it all continues by design. Some places are not erased by force. They're erased by quiet decisions that simply end the conversation forever. What do you think they saw on that film? What could be so unsettling that the only solution was to pretend it was never found? Let me know your theories in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoy diving into mysteries like this, make sure to subscribe for more.